I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Gayamaygal people. I would also like to extend my respect to elders past and present and any First Nations people watching. Sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
And I am thrilled to be joining you from the unceded Turtle Island, where we have just been the recipient of an apology from the Pope to our First Nations people for things that were perpetrated on and to them. And so I appreciate the sensitivity with which your acknowledgement opens our time together today.
Hi, everyone. Today I am once again going to be chatting about Motherland Fort Salem and the amazing representation that the show provides for so many. Today, as you can all see, we're speaking to the ultimate mama bear, a fierce warrior, and I know for sure that I would want Petra Bellwether in my corner if shit was hitting the fan. I'm just so overjoyed, as you can probably see, I'm like vibrating, to be speaking with the wonderful Lough Haggquist. Hi, Catherine.
Hello, thanks for having me, Ange.
Okay, so to start, I would love to hear in your words, who is Petra Bellwether?
Petra Bellwether is a unique individual, a politician, a warrior, a mother, a daughter, a rule follower, a strategist, a tactician, and someone I think who tries to focus her life on the code that she came up in, but always to make the next best decision she can.
Absolutely. She has such a strong moral compass, which I think is very much from that time in the military and that very military mindset, very this, and this. And she's also incredibly complex, and that's what I'd love to dive in with you today.
Sure.
She's become general of the military from season 2. She's had to work against a whole new set of challenges, especially with the Camarilla overseeing all of her moves. That is such an incredibly interesting angle that this season has taken. How do you think Petra's worldview is taking all of this? She's lived by the military her whole life, as we've discussed, so it must be incredibly challenging.
I think it's very challenging, and I think even going to previous seasons, her issues with Alder were less about the person of Alder and more about Alder's approach to the rules and the code. And so I think that carries forward. I think there is some comfort when you have a code because it's kind of decided for you. But when that's all dismantled, both from within and without, and the people who are your adversary are the people in charge of administering those rules, it does change the focus and the framework and the integrity of those rules. And I think that's what Petra grapples with this season. I think, again, the allegorical nature of Motherland Fort Salem in terms of what is happening in the global conversation about personal autonomy and agency to make decisions for oneself. Episode 6 deals a lot with the personal autonomy of witches and their bodies. And I think, again, for that to be hitting right now in the conversation that's happening generally about people and their bodies, especially those who are able to have children and their bodies, I think it's not again, it is a coincidence, and yet it's not a coincidence. And just sort of the wonderful timing of the allegorical nature rolling out in our storytelling. So I think it's very meaningful that way.
This season, it just keeps, every episode I keep saying it's my favorite episode because they just keep getting more intense and more beautiful. And I'm so glad that you brought up the allegorical nature, the parallels that we've been seeing, because I think it would be remiss to not mention it. It is glaringly obvious in a beautifully crafted way, if you know what I mean. The parallels to real world genocide are very loud this season, especially with the removal of language from the witches. Motherland has this incredible ability to, in a very artful way, bring in those real world things and educate people, because I think a lot of people, if you don't know about it, you know, colonization did a good job of removing that the ability to work that out, if you know what I mean.
Well, and it's not a coincidence that it did, right? Knowledge is power. So if you know if you have the knowledge about what your true story is, then that empowers you to strive beyond those limitations that are forced upon you. And so yes, I think in the broader conversation, and we see that in terms of people trying to reframe what knowledge is appropriate or approved, as part of laying that groundwork for more constriction against people. But I think with regards to Motherland's allegorical nature, it's amazing to me how far in advance these stories have to be conceived, fleshed out, arced out, scripted, shot, and yet when they land, they're so topical. And for everything from vaccines to mask wearing to again, bodily autonomy. And that for me is the hope for the legacy of Motherland, because we were given this amazing gift of knowing when our conclusion was coming. So we're able to craft this sort of lovely 3-season exploration of this world, which I hope, because it finishes, will allow people to discover it and go for that whole ride and continue to see the parallels in the wider world. Because I think that's where true cultural change from artists comes from. The first draft of history is the news. The second is the textbook. But the third is the interpretation of those by storytellers, artists, writers, and making them into stories, parables, allegories, so that they are consumed and that those lessons continue to permeate. So I'm really proud of the work we've done on Motherland for that reason, and hopeful that people will continue to discover this in years to come and see the lessons that are sort of presented in an entertaining way, but as applicable to so many of the things we're trying to continue to progress on.
Definitely. We've been seeing new people on Twitter being like, I've just discovered Motherland. This is so important, so it's just such a, I am a massive fan, and there's a reason for that, because I think that the show is so significant in both a beautiful storytelling sense, but also for this sort of cultural time capsule that it presents.
Thank you. I gratefully received that, because it meant so much to us to make, and we would be awestruck at the way, current events were woven into this other time and place and space, which, with Kelly Wade being the 45th president, is not that off of our time track. And so it's fascinating that even in something that's a complete revisioning of the world, we're still doing the same kinds of things. So it's quite amazing to me.
In the pilot, we are presented Petra as this benchmark of high Atlantic society. She's, straight shouldered, straight back, very military. And in season 2, we start to see her perspective being shifted again. And that continues through season 3. And she's grown so much, even though we've only had her, we've only been seeing her for, I guess, a year and a bit of her life. A very significant year and a bit of her life, when a lot of things have been happening. So what's been your favorite part of this beautiful character arc, this transformation to play?
I love the complexity with which she's written. And I love the fact that there are no easy answers. Because I think for people in general, especially people for whom representation is often a challenge, often things get oversimplified when trying to elevate them into more prominent storytelling spaces. So that she didn't lose her complexity, she didn't lose her code, things didn't suddenly become easy when she got the promotion, that that she has challenges with her kid and her mom, like that there are the same challenges for anyone who is devoted to their work, but also to their family, and having to juggle both. And I love the way she was crafted in that way, so that there were no sort of easy outs. I love the fact that she misses Alder, that that it was about the job and doing the job right, but not about the fact that she didn't love her friend. So I just really love the texture that Petra was given, and that as the relationships grew, she did as well, and was able to change as she watched her daughter become a woman, as she watched her mother changing her perspective on the world and allowing that to impact her. I think was awesome, because I think especially when you feel burdened by a legacy that you have to uphold and be respectful to, you feel, I think, maybe that you don't have choices to grow in that direction. And so looking for those cues and picking up on them, especially with the Minerva dynamic, I think is really a meaningful way to also hold space for what we can learn from generations ahead of us. Because I think that was one thing for the first 2 seasons, just the presence of the Biddies on set and having this intergenerational cast, showing that we're not compartmentalizing people because of age and stage, but that they're interwoven into the fabric of this world, I think was so important. And so even without the Biddies in season 3, that Minerva is a presence and offers that kind of guidance, I think is really meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. I am constantly in awe of the diversity of the Motherland casting. from both, as you've spoken about, age, and also, we have a lot of people of color in the cast. We've got S representing my community as a non-binary person. So much complexity there, and so that must have been really powerful for you guys on set. It would just be such an incredible environment to be able to work in, because you know it's work, but it must have been a lot of fun to be in that incredibly diverse space for those filming times.
It really was. I will miss the process as much as I will the character, because I love those women. I love those people. And it was nice to see the expansion, and that they show up as fully fledged people as opposed to tokenized representation pillars.
Yes.
That there's a contribution made to the world that is regardless of any of the adjectives, pronouns, and other descriptors. They're just a person who does what they need to do. Exactly. And that's across the entire cast. And I really liked that about the way we were all brought together.
Yeah, and does it incredibly well, because you guys I don't think I've ever seen a more talented cast, like consistently.
Thank you.
The emotion and the levels that you bring to all of your characters is just out of this world. And I think one of the main reasons why everyone grasps onto these characters so tight and doesn't want to let them go. But I love what you mentioned about the Biddies, because it's so rare that you see older characters used in action sequences. And that was such a beautiful thing that we got to see, especially in, I think, namely at the end of season 2, when, they're fighting with Alder and protecting her clearly with their lives. I think that's just such an amazing thing, because, there's no need for them to be shuffled off when someone reaches a certain age. You can still keep doing all the cool stuff.
Yeah, and they enjoyed it too. They as a collective would you could hear and feel their enthusiasm for the fun stuff they got to do, as opposed to what many of them got opportunities to do in other types of storytelling. Yeah. So they like their uniforms and their kick-ass nature.
It's just such a I love the concept of the Biddies. Every time they were on the screen, I was like, I want to know more about them, because it's so interesting.
I can tell you that was one of the hardest days on set. Really? The day that they finished filming and everyone gathered, and got a little misty and a little teary, because they had been such a presence and such a calming presence on the set. When they would arrive, they would, they were there in full force, and so they shifted energy, and you just felt calmer and happy to see them, and they had stories to share. And it was a sad day, their final day of filming.
Well, I think there were definitely a lot of sad days, I'm sure, last season, also this season with filming stuff. We can move into that in a second, but I would really love to speak about the family nature of Motherland this season. I think that when thinking of a word to define season 3, it really has been all about connections and family to me. And Abigail and Petra have really been leading that charge. The moment that Abigail and Petra shared from speaking through the mirror in episode 1, using that spree work, which was so challenging for Abigail, it just had me in bits. I was just like, she just wants her mum.
Her mom wanted her.
Yeah. And in episode 6, we got to see Petra hugging Abigail and pulling a dill into that fold as well, which was just so significant and so beautiful. So this is a big question, but how has that relationship with Abigail been for you?
Oh, I love Ashley. Ashley and I get along great. I remember I've told this story before about the first day I met Ashley. I was walking through the production office, and I'd just been cast, and I was sort of, they hadn't known each other from before. And so I was sort of newly arriving, and I'm walking through trying to figure out where I'm supposed to be. And she was sitting reading a script at a table, and she kind of poked her head up, and she looked over, and she's like, "Oh, you must be my mom." She popped up and came over and said hi. And I was just like, "Hi." And we were just connected from that moment on. And so that's been one of the joys, on a parallel track to Petra and Abigail, is just being able to see the lovely young woman that Ashley has continued to blossom into over the years we've been working together. And she makes me laugh, and she makes me proud, because she's really stepped up and done some amazing work this season. It's been such a treat to watch. And it's funny too, because when you watch the episodes, like I'm watching them in real time the same way everybody is. So I haven't seen them in advance. I know some people get spoilers or screeners. I haven't seen any of them. So, you know, especially last night's episode, there were scenes, the scene with when she and Adil return, and the scene when Lynn returns. Those were pretty emotional days on set. Those were getting, you know, so it was, you can't help but be taken back to those days. So yes, Miss Abigail, Miss Ashley, I miss my daughter.
Well, I'd love, if you are willing to talk about it, I'd love to talk about that day where you've shot Abigail returning to this to Fort Salem, because it felt sort of like coming home, but in a very complicated way. We had that sort of beautiful duplicity of Abigail saying, well, this isn't a witch's place anymore, and then at the end Alder saying this will always be a witch's place. Gorgeous.
So it's interesting. Normally we shoot in sequence, like a week, 10 days at a time, a full episode. This season, we were mixing and matching episodes all over the place, and things got shot out of sequence for a number of reasons. And so there'd been a long gap between when I had worked with Abigail, Ashley. I keep doing that myself because they're two A names. I hadn't seen Ashley for quite some time, so coming back to that scene was kind of felt like a reunion, because I hadn't seen her for a while because of the way the schedule had worked out. And so that was very powerful. That what you see is really being happy to see her and to get to embrace her. And likewise with the reunion with Lynn, that was very close to the end of filming the entire, I mean, it comes up in episode 6, but because of the way the schedule had worked out, we were very close to the end of filming the entire series when we did that. So there was just this sense of energy. It was infused with that sense of just emotion that we were all going through as we knew that this journey was coming to a closure. So what you see is very real and heartfelt. You know, I feel like I will know these women and other folk for the balance of my days. And so knowing that the intense bonding that we had during the filming was coming to an end made it really hard to get through some of those scenes, especially since they're wrapping up story as well. So it was a little hard. The
moments with Ashley, those moments that Petra is sharing with Abigail, do feel so sincere. So that must be coming from that. In the hug, all of the hugs are locked in my head, because every single one of them, it looks like it's almost this fear from Abigail that when she lets go, it'll be the last time. And I think the same thing probably comes from Petra. If Motherland is coming to a close, then it is beautiful to know that you were as emotional about it as all the fans are. Even though they will continue fighting to get it moved to another service and that sort of thing. The fight's still there, it's still happening.
We're so grateful for that, you know, to have someone go to battle on our behalf, to have people rallying because of something you've tried to infuse with a sense of hope and spirit and creativity and artistry. To have it received is really impactful on us as individuals. So as a collective, we're like, you know, that feels really nice. But as individuals, it's like, wow, you know, that I said these words and made these movements, and that made you feel something and something meaningful and connected to what I was trying to send. It's not lost on it. We don't take it for granted, and it's not every job that does this or creates this or makes us feel the way we did in creating it. So it's not in any way going unacknowledged or unappreciated in our hearts and in our spirits. So thank you.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit more about Petra's relationship with Alder, the incredibly complex roller coaster that is. So we go from that tension-filled distrust in season 1 to, you know, it's coming to a head in season 2, and then this season we're seeing that grief. And then going to, you know, the wonderful moment yesterday where you got to reconnect with, as you said, an old friend, which is such a gorgeous shift in that dynamic. It's also a wonderful shift that we see in Alder. It's a very different Alder that's coming from the mycelium than the one that was put in as as the fans lovingly refer to as Groot Alder. So it is it's nice to see a different Alder returning.
Full circle moment.
I
think it's a full circle moment for their dynamic, because while we see them appearing to be contemporaries, the reality is that Petra would have been a child while Alder was still in the height of her powers.
Yeah.
And so would have been very much idolized by her as she tried to make her way to be the best soldier for the Bellwether legacy that only rises to the level of ascension that Alder would have permitted. So I think that there would have been this steady rise, you know, as you get closer and closer and closer to your hero. Yeah. And then there's this, you know, meeting your hero and being disappointed that the very rules that got you to this proximity are now being massaged, perhaps by them. So I think that would have been a, you know, a bit of a gut check for Petra about, no, the rules are still the rules. And I think that even with trying to get the rules back on track, I don't think Petra could ever have conceived of being without Alder. You know, especially in the immediate term. I know with the Biddies retiring, that would have definitely restarted a natural progression for Alder. But I don't think that there was ever a sense that there would be a light switch where Petra took over and didn't have Alder as a resource to draw on for the common good of all, and that might be a reframing of Alder back to first principles. So being without Alder, I think, was completely unexpected for Petra. And I do think that, you know, you feel that loss of the gold standard, of the hero, of the person you were trying to be like, even when they stopped being like themselves. And so I think, you know, having her back in touch with the very core of what you idolized about them, I think would have been a very full circle moment for both of them. Because I also think that being embraced, and that handshake that we did, that was very much of Lynn, because it also harkens back to when she comes back to the headquarters at the first time we meet after she's been deposed. So we had, you know, we went into battle with that handshake, and then she comes back and we did it again. And that was Lynn, like, we need to put that button on there. And I was like, 100%, that is so, because again, it just these cycles. I think that's also part of the through line for this, is that the mother-daughter continuum, the mother being the mycelium, just that flow of generation into generation, are all symbols and themes through this. And I think that righted that relationship back to where it was.
That it seems to be so common this season, is especially in yesterday's episode, there was a lot of references back to the pilot, which I loved. We saw, you know, May Craven, who we haven't seen since season 1. And, you know, the relationship between Scylla and Edwin as well, getting to see, again, it's just very Meet the Parents. I love it. It's so it's a beautiful way of us connecting that intergenerational cycle, as you were talking about. And so Motherland seems to sort of be doing this horizontally around its own seasons, but also cycling through the generations, and seeing the new cadets being introduced, you know, telling us that cycle will continue, which is so reassuring in a lot of ways for a lot of people. It's like,
and I like that even as you were describing it, you went like this, which is also very much like the Bellwether weather work. But I also think that's how we progress. Like, it's not linear, right? So we keep going back to what we went before and then going a little bit further. And I think that approach to the storytelling, I think, is so meaningful, because it's not just like season 1's done, so we don't reference it anymore. We bring our history with us. And that's why it's so important.
And we're made better by our history a lot of time, by knowing it and from growing from it.
Those who don't learn from their history are doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
Not my quote, but one that's always stuck with me. I wish I could attribute it properly. But the point is, I got the lesson from it. So, but I think I think so many times we get these stories that don't bring the things that they've established forward with them. They sort of maybe make a fleeting reference, but they aren't core to the next moment in terms of being filled in and fleshed out by that. So I love the way that we get all those references and all those people.
With Lynn, because everyone who I've spoken to says that Lynn is an absolute delight, and so different from the Alder that we saw in season 1 and 2. Maybe a little bit closer to season 3 Alder, a little bit more, you know, the nachos in the bar. I'm not sure about that, but you know. So every moment that you shared with Lynn has been so emotionally loaded in any direction that you've been working with, you know, from that intense tension to the episode yesterday where it was gratitude for each other, I think, was a lot of it. How has it been working and playing with Lynn Renee and creating these stories?
She is an artist to the core of her being, and she is goofy as all heck. And it's such a juxtaposition in this breathtakingly beautiful package that you just you're just in awe of her. You just can't help but just like fangirling over her. And then she just looks at you and goes like, what are you doing? Like she has such a joy around her and causes such joy to erupt around her. You know, she and Demetria, just the remembrances of our times together make me just fill with joy. And it's wild because, you know, we did have a lot of intense scenes. Like I remember we were in the height of COVID when we did the scene at beginning of season 2 where she comes back without my kid, and it's a moment. And we were both it was such an intense scene that we literally at the end of it, when we were moving on to the next scene, we were like, we need to steal away. And it was like, are you okay if we hug? Because like we just need to put that down. And we did. And it was just like, you feel safe risking that level of emotion and authenticity because it's met on the other side of a scene like that. But you also feel safe enough to trust that it is for the work and of the work, and that we're good on the other side of it. But it's, you know, you can't help but feel that power and energy coming back at you when you meet her gaze, especially in the types of scenes that we've had to do. So, which has just made it so much fun. And I think it reads on camera because you can see that there is that exchange happening. And so, it's delightful to have a scene partner like that.
Well, you can also see that you two trust each other a lot because the push and pull between you is very real. It's the same as when you're arguing with a loved one almost, and you're like, I trust you, but also I want to kill you right now. So it has that energy to it. So, and I'm really glad that you brought up that scene at the beginning of season 2, because I don't think I've ever seen a moment of pure fury on a person's face beyond what you portrayed looking at Alder when she returned without Abigail, because, you know, I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that would be the most painful moment in the world. Are there any moments from behind the scenes of season 3, from what we've seen, or from back, that little behind the scenes funny moments that you'd like to share with the fans of Motherland?
Sure. So what so Demetria, or my little sister, in season 2, she had the orange tape. So where they mark our blocking out with pieces of colored tape, and you get assigned a color. And in season 2, season 1, we didn't really think about it. Season 3, I was given orange, and Amanda Tapping came up to me on the first day and she said, oh, you've got orange. That was my color on Stargate. And I was like, oh, cool. So I was like, I've got orange like Amanda. And then along comes Demetria going, what do you got orange on for? And I'm like, oh, that's mine because I have the same color as Amanda. She's like, no, I'm orange. I was orange last season. I'm orange this season. I'm like, but Amanda said, and so I got it. And welcome to a brand new season, sis, because I'm orange tape. And it became this running gag through the entire season, so much so that when Aaron Douglas joined us, he was like, oh, hey, since you're putting down tape, can I have orange? And everyone just went, no. And he was like, that escalated quickly. What just happened? And I had to say, dude, like, why do you want orange? He goes, oh, I'm Battlestar. I was orange. So I just thought I'd ask for it here. And I'm like, this is so weird. So it became this running gag about the orange tape and who got it and why. And it escalated to the point where they created 2 colors of orange so that Demetria and I both have orange tape for our marks. And but it became a moment of levity, right? Like it was one of those things where we're not battling over it. It just became sort of this running joke. But then when Aaron joined us and innocently walked right into it, it just took on a whole new level of dumb but funny.
Oh, that's very funny. But you need those moments of levity. You're creating a very emotionally charged show. In the past seasons, we haven't gotten the bloopers in between episodes. It's great to get them in between episodes. It's awesome because, you know, we're watching these incredibly emotionally charged episodes, and then, you know, a couple of days later, we're getting to see Jess and Amalia slamming into each other in the middle of a running scene. It's a really nice addition to the Motherland book that's being created through these seasons.
For me, what I love, especially when I'm getting the opportunity to talk to people and, and we say, yeah, like we all really love each other, and people, I think there's a little side eye and skepticism. It's like, doesn't every cast when they're promoting say that they love each other? But then when these bloopers come out while that conversation is happening, it's like, oh, they're all quick to laugh, and you can tell that it's genuine. Like they're having a good time. And we really were. And to have a cast that size of rotating people through and just you looked to see who you were working with just out of excitement, not out of preference, because it was just always so fun. Such a great group.
That's amazing. I haven't got this question written down, but I was going to ask you, is there anyone in the cast that you didn't get to work with so much that you would have really wanted to do a little bit more work with?
I didn't get a lot of scenes with S. I would have liked to have had more scenes with S. I would have liked to have had more scenes with Arlen and also with Candace, and Amalia, because so many of ours were just sort of like going by. Like I loved that it developed where I got more scenes with Demetria as things went on, and I'd worked with Victor Webster on Continuum, so it was always fun working, with him, and I'd known Douglas for years, so those were fun and they were already built in. But and Bob Fraser,
yes,
I only really got, and he is just like next level awesome to watch on screen. Like and so I was like, oh, I only got the one where at the end where he's trying to take me out, but I didn't really have a lot of scenes with him. So I don't know that I would have given up any of the scenes that I did have, because they were so much fun. I loved working with Luke, who played Sterling, like Kalita, like, I think I'm only really arriving with Michael Horse, and those were some interesting days when the Marshal was on set. He has the most amazing stories to tell from his life and career. So even just to be backstage or behind the scenes with him for more would have been great, because that you only got a couple of stories, and where those came from, there would have been tons more to hear. So
a lifetime of them.
And then of course, grateful for all the time I got to spend with Cheryl Lee Ralph, who's just been someone I've delighted in watching my entire career.
She is incredible.
And just a force of nature. Like you just feel her presence arrive and everything falls into line. And regal is the only thing you could use to describe her. Just a true queen.
Absolutely, queen and president in everybody's hearts.
Absolutely.
You are right. It's hard sometimes to believe when people are like, no, we're all on a press junket and we love each other. But from these discussions, and also just the way that we've seen all of you together, it's so clear how much love has been put into Motherland because of how much you love each other. If you could create your own piece of work for yourself, what would it be? So you can go anywhere from, I think Taylor said something to help her get out of the house quicker in the morning, getting ready Bewitched style. And then Arlen said, world peace. So we can go, there's a spectrum. You can sort of sit anywhere on there.
I would love it if I could do a piece of work, it would be if you tested your DNA and you got all the component parts, it would also supply you as a report with all the history.
That's so interesting.
Because I think that's been one of the interesting challenges, is that some people get their DNA back and it locks them into the truth of their story all the way back to your dot. And other people get their DNA back and there's big gaps because of colonization or what have you. And so if I was able to create a piece of work, I would reconnect people with their stories. Like once they know what they were made of, then they could track back to the full and rich detail of where that was in time and place and person. Because I also think it would have the effect of surprising people with what their composition truly is, as opposed to what they've exalted or elevated in terms of what's acceptable and appropriate. So I think when people connected to who they truly are at a cellular level, I think they can't help but walk forward with more empathy, because they start to recognize themselves in others because they have a deeper awareness of self. So I think that would be my piece of work.
Yeah. And that's also inherently about connecting with people as well, which I just love.
Thank you.
So one of Motherland's greatest strengths is its sincere representation, how it champions diversity in a way that so many shows fail. How is it for you to have been a part of a show that so authentically represents so many people who are often overlooked on screen and whose stories are often overlooked on screen?
Oh, it's been incredibly meaningful. Especially with the skill and the casting to bring the right um, array of incredible beings to fill these characters. You can't help but having the residual effect of imprinting, impacting, and acknowledging and enhancing your own experience as a person when you're working with such amazing artists who are so giving and kind and open and willing to share their experience. Yeah. And from a place of enhancing and educating as opposed to admonishing and correcting. Like that's one thing that I really loved, is that the artists who came to play were about fostering an awareness and an understanding through just having interacted, as opposed to making it a space where you had to be super, super careful. Like you wanted to be respectful and acknowledged, but there was space for you to explore and come along. And I love that. And I'm so grateful for that empathy reflected back to those of us who are trying to do well with acknowledging and recognizing and holding up those who join us. So it was great. I also love the fact that, especially reflecting on the arc of my own career, like when I started acting, I was told there's very limited spaces for Black women, especially, I'm 5'10". I'm an imposing physical presence. So I was told that would be career altering because, so many leading men are 5'7" or less, and this and that. And so I'd play nurses and hookers, and that's what I would be. And I was just like, wow, that's not what I'm here to do. But it was so tokenized and relegated to specific lots. Yeah. So that I have this sort of sense from my own experience of what it was like to push beyond that and wanting to be helpful in taking that experience and using it to inform my advocacy on behalf of others as an ally. Yeah. So, because it's the same struggle. It's about being seen and heard as yourself. Absolutely. As opposed to conforming to some other's ideal of who and what you should be. So I love that there was a long enough time horizon where you got to interact with the characters. They weren't brought in for a very special episode of Motherland. It was like, no, these are people in our world and we see them every day and we do what we do and they're part of the team. And that's who they show up as, but not the sole purpose of their conversation. Yeah. Here. And so I really thought that was well interwoven. Again, we were a society as opposed to us. And then the person who would visit, teach us something and go, which can be so beside the point and not helpful. Yes, absolutely. People are not visitors in each other's life. Everyone makes an imprint. What has Petra Bellwether or playing Petra Bellwether meant for you? Oh, wow. Just the most amazing opportunity. I mean, separate and apart from the people who I'm taking with me, to have this amount of time with one character. I mean, as a journey person actor, you go from gig to gig and show to show, and you love it when you get to do a 3 or 5 episode arc, but you sort of know that your time runs its course and you do your thing and you move on to the next thing. And so to just keep coming back to this world and this person and to see the challenges she faces and then get to learn lessons in your own life. I want to be as brave as Petra. I want to be as clear in my thinking as Petra. I want to be as tactical as Petra. I want to be as patient. I think what I share with Petra is I think I am a leader who has enough wisdom to know who's smarter than me in the room and to lean on them as opposed to claiming that space for myself. Yeah. And so I love that is something that I completely related to as sort of what I strive to do. But there's so many other aspects of her that sort of set a nice table for me to keep trying to rack up in my own life. So. When it comes to the fans, Motherland fans are the most dedicated bunch. They've been fighting tooth and nail, storm and fury to get the show picked up for season 4. There's been balloons sent to Hulu, billboards put up, petitions, Twitter events every other week. They're very determined to save this show. Sort of wrapping up our questions, are there any messages you would like to send to the fans? First and foremost, thank you. Like undying gratitude for having our work received that way. And I never say never. It has worked in the past. So I appreciate people using their voices for the work, as we would say. That said, I hope there is also space to receive season 3 as it's intended, which is to sort of to conclude this portion of the story. And that I hope that that's satisfying and gives some comfort in terms of knowing how it ends for the time being. But you know, I would love to revisit this world, whether it's a Petra involved world or generations before or generations after. I think there's so much that is meaningful and important about this environment that's been created, that I think there's still lots of lessons to be learned from it. So I hope that Elliot gets that opportunity to fire up the word processor again and bring us some more from this space, because I think there's a lot more that these beings could teach us.
This is sort of where my questions conclude. I would love if you would like to play a little quick game with you. This is just thinking about what the characters would do on their day off. If there was no saving the world to do, no expectations on them, what would Alder do on her day off?
Bourbon and jazz. Or the blues. Like she liked a bourbon, and she liked listening to her classic rhythm, blues music or jazz. I think she might enjoy jazz as well.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what she's kicking back doing. Taking the braid down, letting it and kicking back with a nice glass, couple of ice cubes, clinkety clinking.
Perfect. What would Abigail be doing on her day off?
Moving the earth with a dill.
Truth. What would AngeChats be doing?
AngeChats, wow. I think she's taken the head of surveillance really, really well. So I think also that I think she has a book of scores to settle. So I think she might start tracking down some of those folks she needs to have a conversation with using her new toolkit. That's what I think she might.
Using a bit of her Scylla learnt spree work, maybe.
Indeed. I think she may have a couple of conversations to just show up on people's door and tell them a bit about themselves.
That would be terrifying.
But wouldn't you tune in to watch that?
Oh, it would be amazing. I want an AngeChats special, which is just her tracking down people who've done it wrong. That'd be.
I would so subscribe to that channel.
Same. What would Tally be doing?
Oh, Tally is just a sponge for knowledge. So Tally just wants to learn all the things about all the people and tell you about it. Like she, with an enthusiasm and a wide-eyed, like, isn't this cool? So, she would be learning and sharing and repeat.
What would Raelle be doing?
Playing guitar and singing with her dad and hanging out with her dad and Scylla. But I think a perfect day for Raelle would be Scylla and her dad. Because I think it brings her so much joy that Scylla and her dad have their own bond. And I think that having the two of them together, hanging out in the session would be a perfect day for her. Playing some guitar, having some food, just chilling.
Yeah. And likewise, Scylla's perfect day.
Raelle all day.
Yeah.
Just having that space to just be an exhale, because all of their interactions have been inhales. They were like, so I think just to be able to sit with Raelle and exhale and just be, I think would be a perfect day for Scylla, without having to look over your shoulder.
Definitely. We haven't gotten to speak much about her today, but what would Isadora be doing on her day off?
Oh man. I think Isadora, of all of us, is the character who is truly doing what she loves. So I think I don't think a day off, like I think being separated from her space would cause her more stress than relaxation. So I think she just wants to be left alone, no interruptions, and all of her toys to try stuff.
Yeah. Maybe just sitting and having a conversation with the mycelium for a little while.
Yeah. I also think that she's such an interesting character, because every so often you get these flashes of kind of like a little bit of a dark side to her. So I think she might want to do some kind of experimentation on the red suited folk just to see, what they're made of.
Yeah. I see that.
I could see, if left alone unsupervised, she may have a whole battery of experiments we might not want published.
Yeah, they could stay in the necro space. That's probably, just leave them there.
They'll end up there anyway. Real talk.
It's true. That's very true. What would Nicta be doing on their day off, do you think?
Nicta truly got to stop running. I think she might want to transition. I think she might want to just release the constraints of this world. I think she would actually look forward to putting her burden down permanently, and just because I mean she's been on the run for herself. She's been on the run for the unit. She's been on, like, she's just always being chased.
Yeah.
So I think she might just want to not be chased anymore.
And finally, what would Petra be doing on her day off?
Oh my gosh. I think Petra's a gardener. I think Petra likes her nature walks. I think she'd probably go for a long walk on the grounds. One husband's a great cook. She does have 3 to choose from. So I think we would just probably stay home and have family time.
Nice. Lovely.
A little walk on the grounds, little great food.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has just been such an absolute delight. For everybody watching, please tune into Motherland the next day on Hulu. Watch all the extra stuff on Hulu as well. Anybody who's watching outside the US, please make sure you watch Legally as soon as you can. Catherine, if in the future, I would love to chat with you again, be it about Motherland or another project that you will hopefully soon be on.
Thank you. I'd love to do that. This has been a lovely conversation, and I really appreciate you making me feel so welcome and comfortable, and that you appreciate our world so much. So thank you.
You have just the loveliest day. And I will speak to you again very soon.
I look forward to it. All the best.
All the best to you. Thank you so much.
You will. Bye.
Bye.